What is going on, everybody? It's a beautiful day here in Columbia, South Carolina. Today, I am here with a local artist to Columbia. It is JB Samson. How's it going, man?
Howdy. Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome to finally meet you, man, and listen to all your music and stuff.
Likewise. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's awesome, dude. So how was it being an artist in Columbia, how was it impacted, your growth of music or your love of music more because it's a small city or.
How has it impacted my music? That's a good question. For one thing, I feel like Columbia it's interesting because if there's anything that I've learned, so I'm from West Columbia, so like I'm relatively acquainted with the area, but I also moved around a lot growing up. So like I didn't necessarily grow up here.
Okay.
But since I've been back here since 2008. And if there's anything that I've learned about Columbia, it's that if you want to have a good time, you might want to really, really, really like college football. Because that's about all that you're going to get.
Nah, that's true for sure, man. We love watching a losing team most of the time, even though I'm a Gamecock fan.
Man, I liked sports at one point, but once I found music, it was just kind of like, all right, I'm good on all that. But I think Columbia has affected my appreciation for music and the way I make music. I guess in the sense of realizing like some people have a crabs in the bucket mentality, and then some people actually really care about the craft and about community. And so I guess it sort of taught me like be very open and discerning about which side of the fence people fall on. And I'm very grateful that over the last like 2 or 3 years, I've managed to stumble into some really great community. So
Yeah, Columbia or South Carolina as a whole has been neat. I've moved all around this state. I'm from the low country, but I've lived in Lexington, the later half of my life. I'm from a giant farm in the middle of nowhere.
nice.
And it's been always cool being here because it's people, politically people, it's a great area because it's not too heavy weighing on either side, even though it kind of is. It is a melting pot, meaning it's very open area for everyone, just not some crazy extremes, meaning if you've got a passion like art or music, it should be able to thrive, under the right, influences and, I guess mindsets and stuff.
Yeah. I think mindset is a big part. I think mindset plays a big part in it too. I think the difficulty is that perception is can be a very strong, I guess, like swayer of opinion, and the perception, I can't necessarily say whether or not it's 100% right or not, but the perception a lot of the time, from my experience and the experiences of others, is that Columbia isn't necessarily the best place to foster, doesn't necessarily do the greatest job at fostering, uh, you know, healthy and thriving community for the arts.
No, it's a great spot for like you look at certain people. I'm gonna botch his last name, Chadwick Boseman or whatever.
Oh,
The
Chadwick
Black Panther.
Boseman.
There you go. You got me. Save me.
Chadwick Boseman,
But
R.I.P.
it's like
Man.
even he said, rest in peace, and Lord be with his family and all. But it's like he said, is like this state as a whole is a really good spot for someone who's aspiring to grow to have like that. I don't know if you watched Dragon Ball Z growing up or anything, but like that hyperbolic chamber, that quiet place to work on yourself and fine tune what you want to do, and then you can narrowly you can find a target and easily shoot where it is you need to go next. Like for me, I want to go to Austin. I'm into comedy, but I'm also into music, so it's kind of a cool combination.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives you that time to sit here in a good, it's a good economy here, so it's a good spot to kind of grow and figure out where you want to go.
Yeah. That's actually a really good way to look at it. And that's I wish I would have looked at it more that way, like probably 5 years ago. But in retrospect, now with that in mind, that's basically kind of what I've been doing for like the past 5 years. Is like figuring this thing, because I remember I think 2019 I put my first project out, and I think I spent from like 2016 to 20 like probably 2015 to 2018 uh here and there slowly figuring out like, okay, how do I produce? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I'm still very much figuring out
But
a
see,
lot
the
of that
fact that
stuff.
you're doing
You
it
know?
that way, there's a lot of great local artists and producers and so on and so forth, like Mufasa. I'm sure you know him,
That
and guys like
man.
that. They're self taught because they're like, it's like me. It's like I love to play drums, but I don't want
Hmm.
to pay someone to record. I mean, I love that I could do that, but
Yeah.
I'm too stubborn to not figure out how to do everything I want to do
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
And it's that's a cool trait that you have, that you want to learn how to produce it, and all the aspects
Well,
of
I
it.
mean, that came more so out of necessity initially, because like I remember when I first started slowly trying to integrate myself into the music scene. I more so started out because I play drums too,
Yeah.
and so it started out really like I was just playing drums, and a friend of mine, this guy I met, he was a rapper, and he wanted to have a live band behind his music, and so I started playing drums for him. Started, sort of traveling around the state, playing and doing that sort of thing. And the thing that I noticed between playing drums for him and then slowly letting people know, like, hey, I also make my own music. The
Yeah.
first thing that I noticed was so many people had that crab in a bucket mentality. It was just like everyone was so all about themselves
Yeah.
within like the first couple of years of me like trying to put myself out there. Like nobody wanted to do anything for anybody else or special or with anybody else unless it was beneficial mainly to them.
Let me ask
Um,
you this, because me and you can definitely, you're the only other guy I've ever really not met. I mean, I've met other people, but had the privilege and opportunity to sit and talk with about this. Because I thought for a while, I was one of the few people wanting to do this, and so many people thought it was a cool idea, but they just didn't want to get on board with my idea. And I'm like, that's fine, it's my idea, which is,
yeah,
playing drums with like, adding drums or even a whole live band, add some saxophone, some horns, whatever,
yeah.
to like hip hop, bring it back to that Run DMC, like that Beastie Boys sound, that
Oh man,
80s,
yeah.
and it's me working with a lot of the artists, and I'm sure you can relate with this too, is you just, if you were doing the drums part beside like your actual music you were pushing outside of that,
Mhm.
you just wanted to be a part of like, all these guys that are all about themselves, or, you just want to be a part of all the songs. You want to be a part of making the magic happen for everyone. They're just so
Right.
focused on, and you're just like,
I gotta make it. I gotta make it. So don't be trying to take my shine. It's like, bro, I'm not trying to take your shine. Quite frankly, it's kind of dim over there. The
yeah,
the the point is, I want to make music. I want to play. I want to sing. I want to rap. I want to do whatever. Whatever it is that'll allow me to be creatively involved and have a good time with other people that are cool and also talented and skilled in those areas. Like whatever allows me to do that, I'm pretty much down with. Like I'm not trying to rob anybody of anything. Um,
and
and
that's
I
that's
understand.
most of the time the same mentality many drummers have.
Oh yeah, I think
Even
most people just want to play.
like Dave Grohl, man, like
Oh
the
man.
singer of the Foo Fighters,
Hmm.
drummer in Nirvana, like one of the most humble guys ever. I've seen the Foo Fighters live, and he's such a cool guy. Just to shake his hand, and
I've heard he's a cool guy.
he just wants to have fun playing some music, man. And
Yeah.
he's successful and wealthy, and he that's such a cool and that's why I've always thought drummers have something extra in their brain, not this better or worse, but something clearly. If playing the drums is
Oh yeah.
not, you're using everything, all the limbs and the brain, and it's like
Exactly.
I feel like it gives you that extra sense of love to music. Not saying we love it more or less than anyone, but like you love it in a more intimate way,
I
for
think
sure.
I definitely think there's something different about the way that you hear music. Uh, if you, especially if you start out on drums,
Yeah.
like if you can play multiple instruments, like the love's already going to be different as it is. But for some reason, I think like, at least from my perspective, with drums being like the first thing that I picked up that basically led me into everything that I'm doing now musically, there was just something about the way that I heard songs once I started playing drums that just like made everything feel different.
Yeah.
Like it's the reason why I remember Tame Impala came out with that album Slow Rush in 2020. And the amount of people that I heard saying they didn't love that album because they didn't like the way it was mixed. I was like, you clearly don't understand what's going on.
When so many people too, I've like played them examples of stuff, and I'll play them like an old Kendrick album, and I respect Kendrick. I don't listen to him every day, but I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, oh, it's a cool song, it's Kendrick. I'm like, yeah, but what do you think about the whole song? You know,
right?
Exclude Kendrick for a second and just think about the whole mix. Exactly. Like, oh man, that guy made a sick beat. I'm like, but that's not a beat.
Like,
that's not a freaking beat.
It's beyond
that's a trumpet, man. That's drums. You know, he's playing a tambourine.
Well, see, and that's the thing. It's like the Slow Rush album was so good to me. Not only was Kevin Parker's vocals tight, not only was the writing great, not only were the melodies cool, but what made it sick to me was that. And you could sort of hear it sort of becoming a bit of a theme with the album before that, Currents. But on Slow Rush, it was like the drums were literally like the album was mixed for the drums to be the star of the album. Like if you know what you're hearing, you recognize that it was mixed for the drums to be the star of the album. And those drums hit so hard and so perfectly. And same thing, like if you listen to a Kendrick album, you can tell where it's like, whoever he's got producing, whether it be Dahi or whoever, whenever those beats are made and put together, they're crafted. It's not just beat making, they're crafted in such a way where there are these moments where you can tell what's supposed to be the star in that moment, aside from like, obviously, you know, the mix is done perfectly for you to be like, man, Kendrick is killing it. But it's also done perfectly for you to recognize, like, if you listen close enough, oh man, what was that? That just happened at like 1 minute and 35 seconds.
Yeah, what was that weird freaking like splash, like kadunk or whatever, whatever it is.
On the song Element, one of my favorite things I've ever heard production wise, especially and specifically on a Kendrick album, on the Damn album, the song Element, when the second verse starts, the beat cadence sort of like switches up and you hear the kick. And then for a snare sound, I swear to God, it's a freaking ping pong ball. Like it's like a ping pong ball going back and forth. This is just the ridiculous. The way that I don't know how, because I think James Blake and a couple other people helped put that like the production on that together. But whoever's idea was to use whatever that sound was at the start of that second verse, and it's only for like the first, I don't know, the first like 2 bars or so of that second verse, and then the beat switches back.
Yeah.
Like that's such a moment. It's Tyler the Creator. Like the stuff that he does. There's always like this one little thing that happens somewhere in the song that only happens once. And you're like, what the frick was that?
Yeah.
You know? And I think there's something about playing drums, or at least starting as a drummer, that when you listen to music, those things matter way more to you. Or at least I feel like we notice them a bit more than the casual listener of music.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you know, I have a few friends of mine, like DHD, Dusty Doll, you know, Marco even over the years, and lots of other people in different genres.
Shout out to Coast.
Yeah, check out Coast too. He's out there, and real quick, you know, middle of the podcast, I'll make sure to pop it all up throughout there. But let everyone know where they can find all your stuff at and whatnot as well. I'll put it up everywhere on the screen real quick.
Just JB Samson, JB Samson, and Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. I have a SoundCloud that I rarely ever use. I think my first 2 or 3 projects are up there on it. Instagram, just JB Samson Music Official. I think that's Instagram. And pretty much everywhere else, just JB Samson. So, yeah. Feel free to go on the internet and find whatever you find. Check some stuff out.
So I was listening to one of I don't know if it's your latest album, but it was the Overt Thoughts 3, Learning to Float.
Yep, that's the latest project.
And I've listened to like 4 songs on it. I haven't listened to it all the way through, but I, you know, my mind sometimes going into a song I've never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like, what am I going to expect? You know, like what's going to stand out? And if I go into it, you know, like that, my mind immediately gets caught in like whatever I feel like that person who wrote the song wanted someone secretly to find, like the flow. And it sounds like, you know, it was a great album, man. Learning to Float. The few songs I've heard, it's just very, it almost flows like water. It's either like a stream or like a river. Or it's like a,
Yeah.
and let me ask you, one, your inspiration for the album, but also could tell like you've got this sound that fits a few other people that I listen to that not many people have heard. Not saying it's your own sound for sure. I like it, dude.
Thank you, man.
You kind of go a little bit all over the place. But have you ever heard of like Odyssey?
Yes, but I need to do my homework.
He's cool, man. He's got like some I don't know. He kind of does his own thing. Him and like you're religious as well.
Uh, I have I'm based in faith, I guess you could say. The
Yeah.
word religious is weird to me.
Well, yeah. I guess
'Cause
explain. If you want.
not to like down,
No,
but
not
like
at all.
I remember hearing it explained this way: you're religious about brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
Like it's this guy. Frick, what's the dude's name? I can see his face in my brain right now. He was a pastor in Dallas. He's originally from California. But he was talking about like the difference between like religion and faith and like the idea of being religious. Because a lot of people will sort of like throw too much praise on the idea of being religious, and then some people will sort of downplay the idea of being religious. He's like, he said he was religious about date nights on Friday nights with his wife. Right? It's like, I'm religious about Friday night date nights with my wife. He was like, but say she gets sick, right? And I still decide, you know what? I'm going to go to the movies anyway. Do date night by myself, right? I go to the movies by myself. Doesn't necessarily feel right because the other person that's supposed to be there that makes it what it is, that makes the date night what it is, and the reason for even having it isn't even there.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how I look at the idea of being religious. But no, yeah.
No, that's a great way to put it, man. I mean, I'm a devout believer in that. It's faith is, you have to believe. Not what you don't have to believe, but it genuinely, I think it makes a more of a devout, intimate person if they can believe in something intimately
Yeah.
in faith. Something they can't see, but they have this faith that it's there, it created them, or it did this.
No,
It's like
yeah.
and it's always got to be deeper. Religious is
It can be kind of shallow if you're
it can
not
be.
careful, and then sometimes it can be a little too deep, possibly in the wrong direction if you're not too careful. But all of that was a roundabout way to say I believe in Jesus. So if you're cool with that, sweet. If not, cool.
Yeah, we're extremely open-minded. I mean, it's I definitely have a horrible swearing habit. I'm not the best Christian out there, but
I've been cussing like a sailor since the 7th grade.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to stop. And it's really hard because people are people.
Yeah, no, that's for certain. I had a swear jar for a while. I'm like, man, I don't carry cash. So I put a card reader on it and I'm about to go broke. It's like, dang it.
Yeah, listen, times are too difficult for that. The swear jar doesn't exist for me. It's difficult enough just trying to, survive. All right.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely, I feel you. It's a weird thing. But no, I believe in Jesus. I am working on rooting my faith a little deeper because I've been following Jesus for a long time, but how good I am at it,
Well, I'm a believer in the fact that, I have not always been, by God's side, but he's always been by mine. It's
exactly.
I try to every day, put God first in absolutely everything I do, and I fall short so many times in a day.
It's gonna happen.
But it gives me humility knowing that, anytime, I've gone on mission trips and stuff around the world, and even just in South Carolina, I've gained so much more love for the fact that I could see people with nothing loving life. And it's like God's proof to me. Like he's like, hey, look, I told you, man. He's like, I told you that was the case, but the CNN and the Fox News say it ain't that way. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I shouldn't have watched it. And it's it is perspective. I know you mentioned that earlier. Perspective is ultimately key. Just wanting to gain a new perspective is what I feel like a lot of people just not having that mindset of wanting to gain it. It's
I'm very grateful for a lot of the way that I grew up, because my parents were military, so we moved around a lot. But like because of that, like I was between here and Virginia till I was like 7. We moved to Japan when I was 8. We were there for 4 years. Lived in Maryland. I've lived in Texas. I've seen Singapore. I've been to a lot of different places. And growing up and experiencing that at a young age allowed me to, I guess, have a different mindset about people. Like I didn't really know what racism was till we moved back here.
Yeah, I
Like it
mean,
was that was like super awkward, you know?
yeah, my brother Michael, he told me he didn't live in Japan, but he lived in China and Korea, and he would always make the joke with me because he's like, man, he's like, racism in China is so bad. He's like, but I can never tell what's going on because they all look the same. He's like, it was racism on a different scale over there. It was like a class thing.
Yeah, it's
And
classism is so real.
it
That's
was
the
like
bigger
dirt
problem.
and like gold. It was like,
Yeah.
and he was like, dude, he's like, it's just weird. He's like, and now that I can speak Chinese, he's like, I can understand. He's like, what the heck's going on?
Classism is like the real issue. Like racism is really a byproduct of classism in a sense. Still a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. I mean, it's
Still
not
a problem, but I think the deeper seated rooted issue, I guess, is how you look at people based on, you know, who you, I guess, perceive them to be due to what they do or don't have.
Yeah.
And that's just a weird, like, it's already beyond weird to like judge someone based on what they look as far as skin tone.
Yeah.
And then to know that like it goes deeper in that within like the Black community or even Hispanic communities with colorism. And that's a weird thing. But then to throw classism on top of it and be like, I don't want to be around you.
Yeah,
you look like you probably live with roaches.
Yeah, and I mean, and I love the fact that I've kind of been a hermit for the past decade. I mean, yeah, I've explored and done a whole lot of cool things in my life, but it's one thing that I love about comedy. I've never there's been so many times in my life I've been in what people be like, that's Nikki's situation, or a situation where I probably shouldn't have been there. Like one time I was helping Marco out. He had gotten some trouble and he was over in the projects and he's like, dude, he's like, bring help. I'm like, dude, I was like, it's like, I'm fine. I was like, I don't have any shoes on because I'm a hobbit. So I walked around barefoot for like 4 years of my life. I walked over there, wearing my freaking tank top, said Blink-182 on it, tattooed up, smoking like a American Spirit. And these guys walked up to me like, hey man, what you here for? I was like, I don't know, man. I was like, but y'all listen to some funky music. I play drums. You want to make it sound better? He's like, oh, that's fucking cool. And then Marco's like, he's like, you know him? I'm like, yeah, I fucking know him. I was like, you want to go like flick stuff at him? And he was like, man, you funny. And Marco's like, what the hell? And I was like, yo, it's I've never had the mindset of fear when it comes to anything that came before my time.
Yeah.
Even though, and I've always lived with this mindset. I think the world would benefit from this, but it's hard to ask the world of this. I just know that I can do this.
Yeah.
And I just don't talk about racism and things, because if I want it to go away, I just don't. Because if I'm thinking about it, then I know it's like it will somehow, it could sway something deep in my mind, even though I've never been racist,
Yeah.
And I've always lived my life that way. And everyone's always opened me in like with open arms. And primarily when I do comedy, it's in like all black clubs in Charlotte. And dude, I'll make like racist jokes about white people, black people, Asians, dude, and they'll like be pissing their pants laughing. They'll come up, give me a hug. They're like, dude, you're so funny as shit. I'm like, I'm like the worst combo. I'm Irish and Cherokee, like 50-50. I'm like what you call like firewater, bro. I was like, I was like
living avatar.
And I like to laugh in the face of adversity. And it's I see so many struggles, whether it be racism or men just not treating their wives and women, being in 2025, man, I think the biggest issue for the world right now, I mean, not saying racism isn't up there, but it's like men not being men. And I'm not saying you have to be a man. I'm just saying, if you are a man, if that's what you choose to be, that does mean you need to have a moral compass to provide, take care of, be a good father if you choose to have kids, understand your wife as a companion. And it's I went through a divorce. Unfortunately, things like that happen. But it ended up being one of the greatest things in my life. You know, I've gone through the fire and the flames. You know, I read the book of Job far too often, and you know, anytime something bad happens, especially that, you know, it's reading the book of Hosea. It's all a parable. You know, where God tells Hosea to go and marry a prostitute, and she's going to leave him, and he has to go buy her back and then do it again.
That whole thing was like a first, like a level 1 class in like forgiveness.
Yeah.
To say that, like, at least that's just one component of it, but like that was definitely a master class in like forgiveness. Is how do you continuously, like, you still making the same choices? Yeah. All right.
It was a big metaphor for freaking Israel, man. You know, it's like, I was like, so he wants me to like go and, you know, after adultery has happened, I should pursue this. And my pastor's like, no, he's like, I can see how you got that. I'm like, that's all I got, man. He's like, no, it's talking about Israel isn't faithful, you know, and then they're going to wander the desert and all that stuff. I was like, oh, okay, fine. Be deep, God, be deep. Fine. Whatever, man. You know, and it makes me laugh, you know, understanding that it's, I'm meant to suffer to a degree on this planet, you know, as long as I'm pursuing.
If you're alive, it's like, how else are you supposed to appreciate peace?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely gives you a beautiful perspective. You know, that's why I like comedy, man. It's and I enjoy it so much because I've seen so many people go through hard things in life. And music, I used to do that, but then I've seen people, like, unfortunately, like, you know, I hate to go so deep with this, but like I've heard people like who've like physically killed themselves to like a happy song. I'm like, what the hell, man? I'm like, wow, how did that just happen? And so I'm like, you know, how do I get my message out to the world? It's kind of like how Denzel Washington talks. I love that guy. He's my favorite dude in Hollywood.
That man got some wisdom on him, bro.
He is, man. And
he got some wisdom.
He's been married to the same woman for 40 years, you know, and he's a devout believer, and his goal is to get his message out to the world, but he can't just go and preach, you know. He's like, so every movie has like a hidden message, you know, with a good moral, even if it's Man on Fire blowing up people on the hood of a car. He's like, I need that girl back, and that's all there is to it, you know.
But you know what? I think one of the coolest things too is that he drew his line in the sand, because I don't remember when he did it, but at some point earlier in his career, he made it known to basically every director that he worked with. It's like, I take a role of someone who's supposed to be a villain. No matter how great the villain is at being a villain, he's got to end up getting his.
Yeah.
Like, one way or another, if I'm a villain, as the villain, at some point I have to die and come to justice.
It's like the movie Safe House, man. He's a villain the whole time until the end.
You know,
Ryan Reynolds is like, what the hell, dude? What the hell? It's like, okay, yeah, that was a good little twist there. I knew it the whole time, though. I'm like,
that was great.
Denzel.
That was great.
But it's, you know, that's why I get into comedy, man. I like to make people smile, but I can't just walk up and say, smile. That's so like dictators. But if I can make you laugh, like deep laugh, like hurting inside, whether I trip and fall or do something stupid, say something funny, and you're laughing, your face is showing it, your body's showing it. It's like, that's what brings me joy, you know. You have kids and a wife, you know. How does that how does that all intertwine with your music? I'm sure they're all supportive, and you know, being a dad playing music with kids, I'm sure that's just awesome, you know.
Man, it's weird. Like, it's crazy seeing a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old just sort of take to certain things. I guess environment is everything in a sense. But like, I'm not at all pushing music on my kids. Like, whatever it is they end up deciding they want to do, whatever it is that is meant for their life to be, that's what it's going to be. But they just naturally love music so much. Like, it's wild how much they really enjoy. Like, my daughter has her own taste in music at 5.
That's
like,
awesome.
We made for her 5th birthday party. We did her birthday's in October, and she is a Halloween baby through and through. She loves the weird and the macabre, which I'm kind of proud of, because that's where my heart lies sometimes.
Dude, Halloween's awesome, man.
My wife isn't necessarily super thrilled about it, but you know, she'll be all right. She's the light, I guess. But no, we did like a costume party, and then I got my homie Kenya T, aka Miss Kenya Spins, to actually come and DJ for the party. And she was like, absolutely, send me some songs. So I made like a playlist of different songs, 2.5, like 2 hours or so worth of songs for her to spin during the party. And she did a phenomenal job spinning them songs. Transitions were incredible. If you need a DJ, hit up Kenya T, aka Kenya Spins. But after the party, well, actually before the party, because my wife has a tendency of being impatient and is extremely anxiety riddled and needs to
That
know
probably comes from
what's
the
gonna.
kids. I think that you
It was
have
before the
patience
kids,
until
but
you
it
have
got
kids,
worse
and you're like,
after.
where did it go?
It's like her anxiety like already existed before the kids, but it definitely got worse after the kids came about. But like she like has to like she'll remind me about stuff that I'm literally in the middle of doing, or like be like, "Hey, make sure you do this." I'm like, "Oh, you mean like the way you do it?" You know? But like she wanted to like hear the songs before the party because she was just stressed that I didn't have all the right songs in there. And so I'm like, all right, fine. So I'm like playing the playlist in the car, and Zoe's like listening. She's like, "Are these my songs for the party?" I'm like, "Yes." And so now, ever since we get in the car, and she's like, "Daddy, can we listen to my songs?" I'm like, it's crazy.
Don't you wish you could just like
Like,
burn her a CD if that were still a thing? You know,
dude,
like
I'm not so.
just
I was
here
so.
you go.
I'm. I just remember this. I'm upset with myself now. I almost forgot. Kenya T wanted to actually like her gift to Zoe was gonna be like a flash drive with the playlist on it, so that way she can like plug it into her like she's got one of those little karaoke microphone things,
Yeah,
and you can like USB it and like or Bluetooth it and like play songs through it and sing to it at the same time. And then she's got like a little speaker you can do the same sort of thing with. And she was gonna give her like a flash drive with all the songs on it. I freaking forgot
that's one of
to
the
give her
coolest
our
gifts,
address.
man.
Um,
I do that same
but yo,
thing.
so burning CDs was like definitely such a sick thing back in the day. I missed that.
I
But
always loved getting the Sharpie and figuring out what I'm gonna write on it,
right, like
and then later
designing
be
the
like,
covers.
what I wrote on here doesn't match up to what's on it. What the hell? Like,
Like you were being creative. It's
yeah,
called creative
like
license.
faux shizzle
You know?
jam. I'm like, what does that
What does
even
that
mean?
mean?
Yeah,
Like it's a bunch of pop songs.
yeah.
Like, but
Then there's
that's
Ozzy in the middle. I'm like, okay, all right, that was right.
I
Yeah,
guess that makes
yeah.
sense. You know. But no, it's like having kids is it definitely it doesn't make it any easier doing this. I'll say that. Like I tell my friends, like all of my single or married but childless friends, I'm like, yo, listen, if you know you want this, that's great. If you don't know that you want this, I highly recommend, at the very least, mentally and emotionally preparing yourself to be as selfless as possible, or at the very least, being absolutely prepared to find out just how selfish you actually are, and
Yeah.
then having to be willing to completely change that. Because getting married and having kids has, if it's taught me anything, it's taught me that, like, oh, I'm like mad selfish.
Dude,
Like, I'm super
that's
selfish.
very true. You know, it's you don't see many people wanting to have kids anymore, which hey, to each his own.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't blame them with the
Yeah.
world that we live in right now, the economy, everything else. Like, it's reminding me exactly why at one point I didn't want to get married and I didn't want to have kids. This junk is scary right now. But
It is, man. I mean, back when I'd met my ex-wife, you know, she had a 8 month old baby boy, and
oh man,
you know, and I really loved her. You know what I mean? She was really cool, and you know, unfortunately things happen, but like I looked at, and I'm like at a point in my life, I'm like, I've always been great with kids. You know, I don't think ADD or ADHD is actually real, but like I have all of it, and it's you know, kids have always. No matter where I'm at, I work at the zoo, man. Kids will just run up to me, and my coworkers are like, "What the hell?" And I'm like, "I don't know what to tell you." My energy draws kids to like I'm playful and I like to have fun. Like they'll come up and
yeah,
they'll be like, and I'll be like, and the mom will be like, "Did you just karate chop?" And I'm like, "Only in the neck,"
it's
you know. And she'll just be like, "Okay, fine." I'm like, "He'll walk it off. It's
you
fine."
know
I was like, "You got a leash on your child, so chill," you
exactly. I
know.
didn't snap any vertebrae or anything. It's fine.
And it's you know, I saw this kid who didn't have a dad, and I'm like, man, you know, it's I grew up in a very, very tough household, you know, with men. You know, my
Mm.
mom died at a young age, so we
Oh
lacked
man,
empathy growing up. You know, we were meant to, you know, grow up tough, and it was a
absolutely.
beautiful thing for 90% of my life. But when I finally needed to have an empathetic bone in my body. When like
Yeah.
kids are like coming up because like, they bust their knee on the concrete. I do exactly like my grandfather did. I'd cut my hand, be like, you see me crying? And they'd be like, what the hell? And now, but now I'm like, all right, give me a hug, and it's cool because I never wanted kids. And then I saw this kid who didn't have a father, and I was able to change that for him.
Wow.
And he never skipped a beat. All he knows is me, and after that, I'm like, okay, yeah, I really wasn't prepared for all this. I'm like, you need a friend, so like, I was like, hey, we'll have one, another kid. And unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, it's unfortunate more about myself. He's all me,
Mhm.
And it's two boys, and they both act so much like me,
Man.
and they're like, I think genetics have a lot to do with how a child acts, but I also think like you would never know, like, one is not biologically mine, other than the fact he'll be taller than me about a year, and he's 8 years old, because but like it's so cool because they both act like me. They love the same things. Like they'll be like watching Tony Hawk or something, and that, I don't know if they want to get into music. William likes to play guitar, Avery loves hitting the drums, but like I'm like, hey, do whatever you're passionate about, because I had a
Man.
crap ton of passions growing up. It took years to figure it out.
I mean, like you need some time, explore everything.
But it definitely made music tougher. I took a 5-year break,
Mhm.
spent time with the kids, raising them and working, and, not playing, but like not pursuing any kind of goal.
Not as consistent with it, yeah. I definitely get like there was a point in time where even when me and my wife first got married, she used to work at the hospital. She worked at Richland for a little bit as a CNA. And I remember like there would be weeks really where I'd be like, all right, uh I think before we got married, it was like let's say the job that I had at the time, I had to work from I think 6 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And I would stay up anywhere from midnight to like 3 working on music,
Yeah.
like starting at like 9, if not earlier. And I'd be up sometimes from anywhere from 2 to 3 in the morning, like just working on music, knowing I have to be up at like 4:45, 5 o'clock so I can get ready for work.
I'm the same way,
know?
man. People think I'm like sick in the brain because I'm like, well, hey, there's 24 hours in a day, because you choose to sleep 10 of those, that's on you. My body thrives off 4. I'll stay up. That's why I soundproof this room. If it's like 12 and I'm like listening to a song, like maybe it's a freaking Papa John's commercial, and I'm like, that was a really cool jingle. I'll find it on YouTube and be like, no, I have to see what the drums would sound like at 3 in the morning. I don't care. And I've always been that way. And it's like,
I miss that.
it's such a cool thing. It's, I mean, it was great that when my kids were young, like infant stage,
Yeah.
I was like, screw the whole being quiet thing. I played drums, everything. Like I lived in the home to where they could sleep around it. And now they're like
Nice.
deep sleepers. I was
That's
like,
freaking awesome.
my mom did the same thing.
You did it right. We messed up.
I was selfish. I wanted to play, and the whole time they were awake, I'm with them. And you love it, but you're like, hey, I gotta do something, in my brain. And so I would do it anyway, but luckily it all worked out, and they
I think you made the right choice. I think I was a bit too empathetic because we still didn't get any sleep anyway. So
imagine that was rough, with your wife being like a nurse and stuff, I bet that put strain on your marriage. Not so much like things like,
what's crazy?
just her working crazy hours, and
that actually, so when we first got married, because when we first got married, we got married in 2018, and she was still like working at the hospital, and it was like I'd go to work during the week, and she was only working 3 days a week because nurses, they work 12-hour shifts, and she was like giving that her all during those like 3 days and those 12 hours. So if she didn't necessarily need to, it's not like she was working crazy extra shifts or nothing like that. But she thankfully, like, I think she worked nights while we were engaged, and by the time we got married, she got on the days. So
Okay.
it really was fine.
Well, that's cool then. That's
that was a
awesome.
beautiful thing. And I remember there would be like Saturdays were the coolest for me because if she had to work the weekends, I'd just get up early in the morning and I'd take her to work. She had to be there at like 7 or 7:30. Yeah, I think she had to be there at like 7. And I'd take her there, take her to work. I'd get back home by like 7:15, and I would literally work on music all day, like just from maybe 7:30. I might have some breakfast, I work from like 7:30, realize at like 1:45, like, oh, I should probably eat lunch before I pass out.
Yeah.
And then like get back to it and then go and pick her up at 7, you know? So it was like, that was super cool. But the hardest thing was less for our marriage, but more so just for her like mental and emotional state was like, she got into nursing because she just loves people and she loves taking care of people and loved the idea of actually being able to help people. And
She's
so
probably a wonderful mom. I wouldn't doubt it, but I mean
she's an amazing mom,
that nurturing
an
mindset.
amazing mom.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. Not to
Like,
interrupt you. That's something so beautiful to hear
no,
because
yeah,
it's just, man, I look at all these women and even, men or whatever freaking
people.
yeah, it's like I'm like, it's just so cool because so many people, it's such a selfish world right now, like
Absolutely.
through and through. But to see people like, parenting is tough, but it's very rewarding. It's
Oh
tough,
yeah,
but it's
it's beautiful.
that you're impacting the future a little bit. You know what I mean? Whether
Exactly.
no matter what, that these little people are gonna grow up and like be little adults, and then this, that, and other, and they're But to have a good mom is so important because it's having a good mom teaches so many things that the world
Absolutely.
lacks nowadays.
Absolutely. Like,
And then having a good dad
God.
for the latter half of your life. I hate to say it that way, but us as dads, it's like
Well,
from
we
age
kind of get
10
the back
on.
end. Yeah, we kind of get the
Yeah.
back end of things, and like that's like it sounds bad, but like it naturally is set up that way. I think very much on purpose
Oh yeah.
because you need that
Yeah.
nurturing at the
Yeah.
front, you know. So that way you've already sort of got the empathy and stuff, hopefully built in, and then once you get to the second chapter, it's like, all right, now how do I execute things in life, and go after what I want in life and also contribute in life while causing as little harm to others, you know, causing as little unnecessary harm to others as possible.
And I
You
could
know?
tell a lot about that from listening to your album. What was it? The one I was talking about
Oh yeah,
earlier.
Over at Thoughts 3.
I could just tell by listening to a few of the tracks. I don't know them off the top of my head. I have it pulled up here, but I could just tell by listening to your lyrics and the way you compose this song that you are a father.
Oh
I could
man.
just tell by the way you could always tell when someone's like a dad if you really know.
What's to
Like you
look
could just
for?
tell by the lyrics and the way that they display them, the way they talk,
Yeah.
their demeanor through it. And I've normally always been kind of right with that when it comes to music. It's I can. I talked about Ozzy a minute ago. It's like, God, he's freaking crazy. But, I love
Poor
rock and
Ozzy.
roll. But I'm not like, the Osbourne show. Like, yeah, he was dead. I don't know if I'm gonna call it great or not. I'm not a judge, but like,
He
God,
was
the
he was a
freaking
father.
yeah, yeah, he was Ozzy. Yeah, but it's cool, man, because I could tell, like, your music. It's a really cool sound, dude. I'm very honored to
Thank
sit
you,
here
man.
with you, man. I know you may not be like the biggest guy out there, but dude, I would love to help you and your music grow.
Oh, thank you.
It's such a
Appreciate
cool
it.
sound. It's so neat to hear something different from the normal uh off the bookshelf kind of sound when you go down the mainstream like kind of strip. I've always loved just showing up to a dive bar in a random
Yeah.
city. It's like Wednesday night, there's a show. I'm like, I don't even know what that word is, but it's $10. Cool. And then I'm like, who is this? These guys are awesome, or whatever it is.
It's
I've
always
shown up
such
to a
fun.
bagpipe freaking band before. I'm like, this is cool. I
Okay.
don't know if like it's gonna be tough with drums, but like, hey, I'm listening. But I've learned so much about music and appreciating artists and what they do.
Yeah.
And that's the goal of this whole podcast. Yeah, it's to get my comedy out there, on a lot of different episodes. And I'm big in conspiracy theories just because I love thinking deeply.
Yeah.
I love conspiracy theories because there's probably not an answer, but I love the fact that I bring up a topic and people can just dig, 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 dig. And
Yeah.
we know the answer isn't there, but like it just challenges the brain to go through the void of knowing
Well,
there's
it's
no
like
end.
you don't know.
Yeah.
It's like that's really what it is. It's like you don't know. However, these options are all kind of viable
Yeah.
depending on how you look at it. And so it's like I wonder. I look at it this way. It's like God knows all, right? He's omniscient. He's omnipotent. Like he's got it all figured out. He knows what's what. If there are options 1 through 1 trillion that you get to choose from in life in different situations, he literally knows the outcome behind every single one of those doors.
Yeah.
So regardless of which door you choose, he knows the outcome and the consequential outcomes of those outcomes and that sort of thing. And conspiracy theory thinking is kind of like that in a sense. Not necessarily in the like, you know exactly what's going to happen sense, but more so in the like, it's just fun to look behind each door.
Yeah, it's so
You get the
cool too.
opportunity more so to like theoretically look behind each door and see what's what,
Yeah, I mean it's neat too because some of it is you can find facts and a lot of it too. It's sometimes most conspiracy theories that I've like deep dug, actually I could end up finding enough to be like, no, I think that with enough people and enough like research and evidence that I've seen, like most of them are kind of like it lines up with this being a very, very possible outcome, meaning it's 98% kind of like true almost.
Yeah.
With some of them, even like UFOs, it's so crazy.
Aliens are real. Let's be honest.
They are,
There's no way that we're the only things here in this large freaking galaxy that they keep saying is huge and getting bigger. Come on now.
Now think about this, and then I'll tell you this is what caused me to, truly just love, aliens and thinking about it and like wondering what it is. As I was reading the Bible one day, and I was reading, I can't remember the exact passage, but I was reading about Elisha and when he was ascended into heaven, the only person who never died in the Bible. He was ascended into heaven, and the Israelites are like, whoa, this beam of fire came down, and like he was ascended up into these chariots. And I think of that, and I'm like, I read John and like Revelation and all these things he's talking about. The Bible talks about dragons many different times. And it's like when this conspiracy theory that is true, but most people won't believe it. Science and like, religion, like Christianity, if they could agree more, they'd be like, damn, okay, we've got the answer now.
Yeah.
But it's going to be one of those things. It's like dinosaurs, it's like all of these things. The first time the word dinosaurs ever brought up in human history is about 300 years ago. Dragons, thousands of years ago, China, Russia, Mayans like drew it on the wall. They were talking about dragons, and it was talked about in the Bible too. And it's similar skeleton, but like I'm not saying I don't believe in dinosaurs, but like I know that dragons were definitely real.
I mean, I think they both existed. Here's the way I look at it.
Dude, the Loch Ness Monster's a dragon or a freaking dinosaur. So like, yeah, they both existed,
It's just one of those things where it's like, how they say, and this is, I guess, maybe more or less a conspiracy theory thing, but they say that like the reason why we see some of the stuff that we see in movies, especially as far as like technology and stuff goes, early on, is like to, I guess, sort of get our minds accustomed to the idea. So that way when it actually happens, it's like, oh, that's normal.
Yeah.
Come on now. No, somebody didn't just randomly go, oh, I wonder what happens if you take a lizard and throw some wings on it and make it huge. You know, like dragons existed at some point. At some point, like alligators were more than just alligators.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite pieces of art, man. Because I grew up in the swamplands, the cesspool of the state, and have you ever seen the movie The Patriot?
Yes,
with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
So that's where I grew up in the low country, Bamberg. Kind of outskirts of Charleston, Santee Cooper area, very swampy, but like those mossy oak trees, and we had 2,000 acres, and it was home, man. Like breathing in a mosquito, for breakfast was like considered nutritional. You know what I mean? Like it was just part of the day.
That's just summertime in South Carolina, Doc. Like,
but it's with the Bible stuff too. Is like whenever he talks about Elijah going into heaven, it's like, I've always thought, aliens could be, here's a theory I could have. And even reading John is like, what they saw, God's probably not going to be like, hey, look, I'm going to just be like this face in the sky that you're going to know it's God. I'm going to like mess with your mind some because you're clearly worshiping this statue of gold named Baal and he's fat, dude. Why didn't he get a freaking Bowflex? You know what I mean? Like, what? And it's like, why can't he have a six pack at least? Come on, like get with the times.
He could have done better.
And it's
of all the false gods,
and it could have looked like a freaking UFO abduction, with Elisha. It could have been what they saw, their perspective, and it's always been my thing. I believe in angels and demons. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, and I actually ghost hunt avidly. It's like a devout Christian. I love it because I don't I don't necessarily believe in them,
Mhm.
but I've spoken with demons too throughout my life, and it was a remarkable experience that I prayed desperately to have happen in my
Oh,
life.
really?
And angels came to me. These are such crazy stories, but like I can't explain anything other than the feeling of that I knew it was an angel later on in the conversation about how much this homeless dude knew about me that I'd never met. And, it changed my life because he told me to do things that I thought were impossible and things that I was like, how the hell do you know my dad, dude? You're just some dude like chilling here. And I want to go give him food. I'd
Yeah.
worked in 5 Points at the time. This is about 12 years ago. And I was like, I would always take some extra food from Chick-fil-A when I worked there. And if there was anyone standing around, I'd be like, here's some sandwiches, whatever. He's like, I
Yeah.
don't need any food, man. He's like, I don't really eat. I was like, do you do drugs, man? You need help? Want to
Yeah.
talk, whatever. He's like, no, I don't do that either. I was like, well, you look, and I made a joke. I've always loved comedy, and I've always loved skating on the ice of, controversial things. I was like, man, I was like, you look like you smell. I was like, do you want some deodorant? I'll run into CVS. Like,
Yeah.
can I help you? I was like, I'm broke, but like, hey. He's like, because you were looking at me from over here, so I'm over here coming to talk to you.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I wanted to talk with you. I was like, why me? And he's like, grab a seat. And he starts telling me all these things about my life. I hadn't spoken to my dad in years, went through a big rebellious phase, with just so many things going on in life.
Yeah.
And he told me all these things that he was like, hey, you need to speak with your father more. I haven't talked to him in years. He's like, and he starts telling me things about when I was a baby and like my mom's name and what she was doing that day and time and like all these things. I'm like, how do you know all this? He's like, well, I know
Wow.
Carolyn too. He's like, and I know Cleveland. I was like, how do you know my grandparents' names? And I'm like, this dude I've never seen. There's no way he was ever in my life,
That's wild.
And I did all these things. And so years later, I went through this very stubborn phase of, God showed me who he was deeply. He put me through hell and back, and I stuck with him. And I was like, hey, show me the devil. I was like, I'm not afraid of the devil or any demon. I'm afraid of God, but I love him equally. I know where my allegiance is, and I'm on the winning side. And it's, I said there were so many people around me at that time, and I was young, and I wanted them to believe in God, but I'm never, and at this time I'd still done a lot of mission work beforehand. I've never been a person to push religion, but I want them to either see it in who I am
Mhm.
or like some way I can really make them genuinely want to believe.
Right.
And like I was like running out of options, and these people, some of them are like suicidal, but they're friends of mine. And I was like, God, I was like, you know what? I was like, I have another idea. And I prayed about this for 3 months. I was like, show me the devil. I was like, because if they can see that
Mhm.
and they can see how evil that is, they clearly have got to know they can look up. Like if you know there's that much evil, there's that much of an opposite. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it was so crazy and surreal. And it's one of those things where it's always impacted my life to where when I look at people, I see things almost differently now after having these conversations with, a demonic force, my Cherokee side of me, I'm still in touch with a lot of my family that's full blood Cherokee. They were the only Native Americans to you know, uh, adopt Christianity because it was basically everything they believed.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things when people, it's even like talking about like the, Christopher Columbus and stuff, the history books have all that wrong, hearing it
Mhm.
from my family, they're like, we actually did more wrong than the white man. He's like, bro, it's so funny. He's like, I'll never, my great uncle Mac would be like, he's like, look, I used to care about like trying to, he's like, it's never like, he's like, it's always someone who's never seen oppression or something who's
Mhm.
fighting me on this. He's like, I'm not trying to fight a war. He's like, one, they didn't run into the Cherokee. They ran into the Blackfoot and the Apache, and they ate people. And so, there's a lot of stuff, when you watch like,
Well then.
Pocahontas and stuff, and there's a lot of things, but even the Trail of Tears and stuff, the history behind all this is like, so many people thought this is this horrible racial oppression against them. And they're like, no, we just suck at making deals, and he was reading me all this stuff. He's like,
just suck at making deals.
he's like, dude, we traded beaver. They gave us beaver pelts. And, we agreed to give up the land, and then we didn't like the deal later on. And so they were like, no, go, and it's like, and there's so many things. He's like, but there was a lot of back and forth. And the perspective of it is, I've never met a full-blooded Native American, which I know a lot of. I could still go on the reservation and stuff, and
Yeah.
Nantahala up in North Carolina, the last forest up there. And none of them ever look at like white people. They would never look at a black person and be like, "You fucked with me." You know what I mean? It's like but like they never look at white people like, "Oh my God," like, they're greedy, man. My family, they love their greed. They love their casinos and shit, and they're like, we're cool with what we got, and it's
I mean, hey.
But not all of them are, and I've always loved that perspective. And and as I got older, I started asking different questions. I'm like, what is the totem, and what is all this, and like, what about angels and demons? He's like, we've been fighting demons our whole life, He's like, that's what we do as natives to this land. We all walk. He's like, we're protectors of, this is conspiracy theory for many people because AI and stuff put all this stuff out on TikTok. But
of course, freaking AI.
The Navajo do this actively out in the Midwest, but you have to be a Navajo. If you ever see a guy who looks Native American and he's got tattoos down his eye, that means he kills skinwalkers. And so the Cherokee do that as well too, up in the Appalachian Mountains. Like, basically, they're essentially, whenever Lucifer fell from heaven, those were the original evil spirits on the earth. Right. They call them elemental spirits of the earth. It talks about in the Bible too. Right. And like these things of like, I don't know how the hell a skinwalker's made, but like he tells me stories about how they'll go out and hunt these things. Like they'll turn in someone's dog or something, and like, it's so crazy people don't believe it. He's like, dude, we don't ever bring cameras and stuff. He's like, we just do what we have to do to protect, people and us.
Well,
and
you're
stuff.
Not doing it for the gram. You're doing it for the good. Like,
yeah.
That's interesting, man. That's like crazy because the amount of stuff that exists in the world, specifically within the spiritual realm, that a lot of people don't realize is there or don't want to believe exists. Like it's a lot of stuff out there. It's a lot out there, and I think a lot of people don't realize just how real the spiritual realm actually is. And
no, they definitely don't. I think there's bad people too.
Oh, for sure.
Like you've seen the movie The Conjuring, or have you ever heard of it? Scary as hell.
I didn't watch it. My wife said it was the last scary movie that she ever watched.
That makes sense. So
it messed her up big time. But I don't mess with due to some of the stuff that I've heard.
Once you have kids, you stop. I do too.
I like a good horror movie, but I don't mess with stuff that's like,
could be real.
Spiritually, this could be real.
Yeah. So that house is real. It's up in so I actually booked a whole night this summer. I'm gonna go stay in there, and I've never been. So the demons I've talked to, that they knew they couldn't harm me. They knew that, but that's knew if there's anyone around me that's not me,
then they're going for
or believer in Christ, and it's tough to. I'm definitely not judging the world if you do or don't believe, but like that's fair game, and they know that. That's how they get to me.
Exactly.
But I have a feeling that home was because it's built on a Native American burial ground and stuff like that. It's tough for me to believe entirely that it either was an evil entity or if it was something different, and I'm just interested to figure it out. It's most people, like my old pastor's like, why the hell do you do this? I'm like, one, you're out preaching, which is great. Thank you. I was like, but this is how I preach. I was like, if I show the world the devil and unface him, I was like, there you go. Because you see artists out there like crucifying themselves on stage and stuff and doing things like, do your thing. I'm not judging.
Just wild, man.
Whatever. It's free world, but
I'm gonna pass on that though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm gonna pass hard on that. Like,
pass on that.
What the, and it's like, that's what I try to do with anything I'm doing is get my point across. Even though I'll make some very edgy jokes, people know at the end of the day, I'm always there to help anybody and whatever. They always know.
I think the message is, whatever it is that you do, the message should be as clear as possible while still leaving room for enough people to actually be able to engage, if that makes sense. Like, if it's so unapproachable that people are like, immediately, I don't know, then you're probably going to have a tough time. if you can make somebody laugh about something, you'll probably have a better chance at having their mind open to what the message is. And I mean, I think that's the reason. I remember some years ago, I was actually part of this podcast called Free Thinkers Radio podcast, and there were like a couple of sort of spin-off type shows within the umbrella of the Free Thinkers Radio organization, and one of them was called Urban City Radio, and there was we interviewed this guy named Regal. I want to say he was from Georgia. I want to say he was from Augusta.
That's a cool name.
Yeah, that was his name, Regal, and he was like super cool guy. Very much loved God. And we had really good conversation with him. But like after the show was over, he pulled me to the side and was like, "Hey man, if you don't mind, before I leave, I feel like God's telling me to tell you something." I was like, "All right, what's up?" And he was basically like, "Keep doing what you're doing. Like what you're doing musically, as far as like the content and the substance within your music, the way that you package it and deliver it to people, the sounds and all that kind of stuff, the way that you operate musically and artistically is needed." And he said that he was like, "You are going to reach a lot of the agnostics and non-believers and intellectuals and that sort of like those sort of people, because there's an openness, I guess, to the way that it's presented. You know, it's something that is easily approachable, you know?"
Yeah, it's like if you listen to Lecrae and stuff like that, before you even listen to him, he's a Christian artist. Like you're an awesome local artist doing like R&B, hip hop, a little bit of like kind of everything. You got some funk and jazz kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and
man.
it's not like you're not like slapping the label. Like I'm not walking out there like I'm a Christian, but like, yeah, that's who I am. But I'm not. And once they get to know your music, I feel like you're very right.
Well, I feel like it's because I remember I struggled with the idea of, because I was heavily involved in church, like in high school and in my early 20s. Still was out here messing up, but I was heavily involved in church and was really just like, I didn't really actually fully understand what church was even for until I was 17. And like the guy who ended up being my youth pastor at that time actually explained like why we even do this. And it was like, I intrinsically knew like God was real, right? Like there was just like, I think I was 8 years old. They used to do a play called This Man Called Jesus.
Oh yeah,
Went and saw that. Yeah. Funny enough, my wife actually basically grew up doing it. My wife grew up actually performing in it. Had no idea.
Did you ever heard of just quick interrupt? Did you ever heard of it was at North Trenton Baptist? It was called Judgment House.
That sounds familiar.
They don't do it anymore, but that was a cool one too. But yeah. Sorry, continue on.
But yeah, so I was like there. I was 8 years old. They do the production. I'm like, kind of makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
And then like the angels come out at the end. They're like, you know, if you want to accept Jesus today, just raise your hand. Angel will bring you a little New Testament and all that kind of jazz. I was like, yeah. And so
that sounds good.
I did the thing, and it was cool. But like, there's, you know, it's a big production sort of situation, and we didn't actually go to the church that put it on, and life was a life. So it's like, there's no follow-up. That's the difficulty with that sort of thing. There's no real follow-up. Yeah. And then I'm a child, so I don't necessarily like know exactly what I'm getting myself into or the weight of it, right? But like, basically for the rest of my like adolescent life, I still knew like God is definitely real. Don't really know how to articulate that, what exactly that means, but I know that he's real, and he's the reason why I'm alive and the reason why I'm able to do whatever, you know? But like, fast forward 17, figure out what church is actually about. I'm like, oh, I get it, you know?
Yeah.
And so like my early 20s, I'm very, very active in church and that sort of thing. And when I started diving more into my artistry, I spent like the better part of like a year or two trying to figure out, all right, so do I call myself a Christian artist or not? Because by that time, I had already started, unfortunately, getting jaded
Oh
about
yeah.
by church and by religion.
Yeah.
Super jaded.
It'll happen.
It was the weirdest, like, because like I said, I was heavily involved in church. And at first it was really cool. And then I started to see behind the curtain. And then I started realizing, like, oh, the Wizard of Oz is just some freaking weirdo with a freaking
Yeah.
smoke screen, you know? And that was like super disheartening. Like, it got even more disheartening. It's become even more disheartening, quite frankly, over the course of the last few. Like, I found out that my youth pastor, the guy that was my youth pastor from the time I was like 17 and discipled me from like age 17 to like 23, 24, found out a couple of years ago that he apparently was out here messing with underage girls.
I was about to
Like,
say, I feel like
throughout his
me and
tenure.
everyone viewing this just knew where that was going, which is just
Scary and
Yeah.
sad, right?
I'll tell you, man, like, I'm 31 years old, and it's always had Christ in my heart. I've actually been baptized 3 times, because I'm like, no, I actually want to do it. I feel like I need a refresher or whatever.
I did it twice.
But I haven't been to church in about 10 years, and I'll tell you why. I pray and I read the Bible, and I go out and I do what I can, to get his name out there. But too many times I saw a good thing being taken and made bad, and it was deemed acceptable. And every dude, and when I moved to Greenville back in 2014, I lived there for about 4 years. My goal was, while up in Greenville, was to go to every different church, meaning like every different denomination or whatever I could find within like a year and a half span. And I had knocked them all out, man. It was crazy. But by doing that, one of the craziest things was I ended up at a cult. I was like, what the hell? I was like, what is this? It said church.
Bound to happen.
I was like, this looks like a church. And they're like, nah. I'm like, okay.
You're in now.
I'm like, nah, I'm out. But it was so crazy. So many people, I've learned, like, you've got to have, it's an intimate walk you have to have, and that's what matters. It's
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
and back to like Denzel Washington too. That was the big moral of the story of Book of Eli, was not that he knew the Bible and he read it because he was the last person that had a Bible and he was blind and it was all in Braille. It was that he was the temple everywhere he went. That's what it was, and it's.
I need to rewatch that. I think I watched it like with a group of friends, and it was more of like a kickback situation, and it was on.
Yeah, definitely
like,
watch
I
it,
need to
man.
actually rewatch that and like watch it.
Definitely not a kid-friendly movie, but
no,
it's
from what I remember, no.
No, it gets a little gruesome, but it's it's
well,
it's
so's the
cool.
Bible,
Yeah, I mean, and that's
things.
why I think the Book of Revelation's the most important book. I don't think we're meant to understand it, but 2 things learned from it is how much if how much God loves you, and if you don't believe in God in that time, what He is going to do. He's very clear. He's like, look, he's like, hey,
here's the deal.
Yeah, he's like, I'm giving you all this time. I'm even going to give you like some crazy, crazy stuff, and time after that for you to be like, okay, yeah.
Decision made.
Like he's very, very loving and forgiveful, and it's cool. But so let me ask you this too. Like going into 2025 with your music and all, what are some of your goals for music, whether it be performances done or albums created or collaborations or whatever it may be?
Goals for 2025.
And I'm not big on New Year's resolutions, but since it's a new year, like if you have any goals for like the artist side of you.
Yeah. I would say, as far as goals for this year, I want to perform more. That's for certain. Definitely intend on performing more. But I'm also, so far with the way that this year has already started off and with the way that last year ended, one of my goals is definitely to perform more. The other side of that coin, though, is that I, over the last couple days, have been really like sort of thinking about it and remembered how I think last year, I really didn't perform much last year, which is why I want to perform a lot more this year. But I also know that I spent a good chunk of that time that I wasn't performing working on the last project, OT3, Learning to Float. And so, like, I don't want to put too much pressure on myself to try and do certain things and overextend myself, especially with a wife and kids.
Yeah.
Trying to make sure I don't take too much time from them. But at the same time, trying to figure out how to balance that while also allowing myself time to be creative and just be at play with my creativity, not like trying to hammer out these songs and do this and do that for the sake of productivity. But I had to like pick goals. It's definitely to perform more, get out of state for sure with performances.
Yeah, it's easy to get on a stage, not in Colombia, because it's cool whenever you're out of the area you're living in.
Yeah.
Because nobody there might be some people that know you, but no one
For the most part,
knows.
nobody knows you.
And it's so cool because they're like, whoa, they go
What
into
is
it
this?
open-minded, not like, oh, just another Columbia act.
And that's the thing. When you pull up to a show here in Columbia, unfortunately, a lot of the time, some of the folks that show up, really, they're not showing up to see a show. They're showing up more so because there's usually drinks involved.
Yeah.
And if they are showing up to see the show, some people might have some sort of preconceived notion of, all right, let's see what kind of whack, mediocre act we got tonight,
Yeah.
But I'm grateful to say that generally my experience in my reception whenever I perform, or at least when I have performed here in Columbia, it's usually been, okay, yeah, it's not the mediocrity I was expecting. It's something better.
Do you normally, when you perform, do you normally perform with like a few other guys like before or after you, or
it's
acts?
usually, I think I've done like a couple situations where it's really just been like, people came to see me, but it's definitely the majority of the time been like, all right, here's a bill, and you got so and so, you, so and this person's headlining, or you got these 3 or 4 people doing the thing, and then I'm headlining, that sort of thing. And that's, I guess, sort of par for the course. It's usually going to be like anywhere from 4 to 8 sort of performance situation. I'm very grateful that people are starting to realize, like, okay, maybe having 7 and 8 people perform in a night isn't necessary and completely not conducive to anyone's lifestyle. Like, even the folks who are trying to hang out in the bar till like 1 a.m., nobody's really trying to hear like 8 different performers or bands or artists do whatever. Like, this is not a festival, and even festivals, like, they're set
intense,
up,
man.
like, festivals are intense, but they're set up like a certain way for you to be able to be like, oh, this person's performing at this time, this person's performing at this time, but then like all these different stages. Because 9 times out of 10, the people who are trying to see freaking Playboy Cardi, Kendrick, 2 Chainz, and whoever else aren't all necessarily also trying to see freaking Tori Moi and freaking I don't know, Paramore and whoever else. You know? Now, granted, I would definitely go and see all of those.
Seen Paramore quite a few times. Yeah.
I definitely want to see Paramore.
I mean, what you're saying is right, man. All my favorite festivals no longer exist. Like, I used to go every summer, like 2 or 3 times. I would follow Van's Warped Tour.
Or I knew you were gonna say Warped Tour.
That or Mayhem Fest or
I hate
Oz
that
Fest.
I missed out on that.
Yeah, it was cool, man.
I heard
like
it was
that was
take time
because they would have it set up with like 20 different stages, and like you would just know like, oh, you could listen to Parkway Drive, and this would be heavy, intense metal, and over here you got like, some like Sum 41 or like Yellow Card or something, more like pop punk.
I need to revisit Yellow Card. A girl put me on the Yellow Card.
They're great, man. They have a violinist in there, which is one of my favorite things about when I got into them in like 2001. Was like hearing like the song "Way Away" off Ocean Avenue.
Yeah.
Like that song, just like dun 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 dun.
There was so much good guitar stuff in that like early pop punk stuff. Like,
it's pop punk is my favorite genre, 100%. Doesn't mean I don't love, and I absolutely love every genre. I know some crazy weird things about music, but it's you can't be mad and listen to it. It's always
I mean,
been.
it's fun.
It's like happy rock.
Yeah,
It's like
fun. It's a good time, and that's like it's what people want. If anything, I think that's what we're missing right now in music.
well, Blink
And I've
182
seen a
got
lot of
back
people saying
together
that.
again, man.
Yo, I heard that tour was pretty crazy
It
too.
was. It
Heard that,
was.
But I think right now we're missing a lot of in music to an extent, because obviously, like, if you look for it, you'll find it.
Yeah.
But I think that as far as mainstream stuff goes, there's just not enough like fun music anymore. Like there was a time when music was like specifically mainstream music was like, oh, this is fun,
Yeah.
and it's like now it's not. Like even when the band Fun came out, those songs were sad as hell, but they were a lot of fun.
It's like listening to like what was it, MGMT? It's
Oh my god,
you're like
that first album is so great, and then you find out the whole time they're making fun of like most rock and pop acts.
Yeah, and I'm like, man, God, y'all's brains are fried. There's no way you didn't just eat the whole sheet of acid. Like, how'd you even like? But it's cool. It's funky. It's different. It's definitely neat. So I mean, let me ask you. So with your music, I mean, would you consider yourself more of a hip hop artist or R&B, or like what do you kind of enjoy doing more of, or even maybe like rock? Who knows? You know what I mean?
So over the last couple of years, well, over the last chunk of years that I've been making music, I've slowly come to a realization, and I've spent about probably like the last year and a half or so telling people once I had the aha moment, like, oh, that's what this is. I've spent probably like the last year and a half telling people that I'm a kid who loves hip hop and found out he was an alternative artist. That's like the
That's
easiest way to
awesome.
explain it, because it's like I love like I don't.
Yeah, like what's your greatest like musical influences that of all time?
So this
Bands, hip hop, any of it, man.
I
Like,
love talking about this just because to me it's so fun and so weird and cool. The musical genetic makeup, right? I started playing drums at 13, right? So I grew up on like a mixture of like gospel and 90s R&B and oldies and some, pop
like
and that
what
sort of
what
thing.
drummer did you see that made you
That's
want
the
to
crazy
play?
part.
So I know we were talking about this earlier, but I
Yeah.
kind of forgot, and I wanted to save it for
Oh,
this.
okay. So the drummer that I saw that made me want to play drums, and this is the crazy part, wasn't even like some big crazy known drummer. We went to a church, and the particular guy that played drums at this church that we were going to was so good the first time that we went. He was so good. As soon as I saw him, I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Like he was that good. I want to say his name was Will. Like I said, not some famous guy or nothing like that. Like just literally Southern Baptist Church. And dude was
Awesome.
so freaking fire. After church, I
People
went up to
sleep
him.
on church drummers, man, but they be laying them
You
licks.
can't sleep on church drummers.
Yeah.
Most of your favorite drummers
Can't go
probably
to sleep
started
while
as
they're
church drummers, bro.
drumming. Yeah.
Most of your favorite drummers probably started as church drummers. So after the service, I went up to him and was like, can you teach me to do what you just did? And he was like, all right. He handed me a set of sticks. And I think on 2 separate occasions, he handed me a pair of sticks, sat me next to him on the drum set, didn't even let me play. Showed me some rudiments, like literally simple. It's like, take that and maybe like 2 or 3 other rudiments. He was like, take that, them drumsticks, this drum pad, go home, practice that on a pillow, then practice it on the drum pad. Literally, 2 separate moments where he basically like taught me different rudiments, said go home and practice this on a pillow, then practice it on the drum pad.
Let me ask you this, since you're talking about rudiments, when I first learned a few, it was one of the coolest fucking feelings ever, dude. I literally felt like I was gonna punch a hole in the wall. I was so happy when I got that simple rudiment, and then I was like, wait a second, I'm playing this on a snare. What if I like played it on the snare and hit the hat and like, oh, I'm gonna throw a kick in here, but I'm still doing the same thing. But then I hit the floor tom and the bell of the ride. I'm still doing the same rudiment, but I just carried it across.
Exactly, you're actually
it was such
playing
a cool
it on
feeling.
the set. I can't remember what the freaking lick was or what the rudiment was. I just remember the way I felt when I did something where it was something I'd been practicing for a while, and I think it might have involved like a triple stroke roll. somewhere in there. And that was something I've never, to this day, I'm not good at triple strokes. I'd probably be really good at it now if I like had spent the past 10 years practicing, which I have not. But when I was actively practicing, like doing whatever it was that I was doing, and then like having that triple stroke roll in there, and then like throwing the kick in, and then like just whatever it was like euphoric. It was something magical.
You felt like a boss. You're like, I
Oh
just
my
did
God.
that.
I was like when it happened, I was like,
Y'all aren't
what?
at church to worship God. You're
Bro.
worshiping me. You saw that? Like, you know, like
it was freaking sick. But not so saw this church drummer. He taught me like a few rudiments, and that was literally it. And then my family pitched together to get me my first like real drum set that Christmas. And then got this DVD with John Blackwell Jr. He like it was like some behind the scene footage of him at NAMM, I think 2002, and then like literally just him doing like these video recorded lessons.
Yeah.
Watch that jump religiously. Fast forward some more, found out about Travis Barker, started watching his stuff on YouTube.
Completely
like,
different styles
like,
between those
covers.
two. You're watching
Totally
this
different.
guy play like a, you know, like a Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones. He just looks like he's just robotic and in this, and it's so seamless. And Travis is over here breaking the face off of the cymbals.
And
like,
that's you know, there's so much beauty in both separate.
I know,
because it's like the fluidity that you get from like John Blackwell Jr. Like his movements are so precise,
very charismatic,
and just like you can feel the passion even within the control.
Oh yeah.
And then with Travis, it's like this intense thrashing that still in a way has a different but still somewhat similar sort of fluidity and grace to it. It's just like it's the weirdest thing. So it started with the drums. Somewhere in between there, I found out like obviously like I heard rap here and there growing up, but like I really discovered it for myself. I really discovered hip hop for myself around like 11. My cousin came to visit us, and he had 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying. Left it behind.
Great starter album.
Popped it in the CD player, and I was like, I heard Many Men. Don't ask me why Many Men spoke to my soul at the age of 11, but it did. Freaking great. And literally wrote my first rap after that. And then just kind of sat for a while. That's when the drums came. And then after that, got into Outkast. Heard freaking Speakerbox Love Below album.
Dude, Andre 3000 is one of the greatest of all time.
Jesus Christ. Like and what's crazy is the fact that he'll even acknowledge, like, between the two of them, Big Boy was the better rapper, which is
yeah,
true.
He was like the calm hype man. You know what I mean?
He was like, Big Boy was definitely the better rapper, but as far as like the all around artist, Andre just had like this spark creatively that just made him what he is and why he's revered the way that he is. So, Speakerbox Love Below, Late Registration, heard those basically like around the same time.
Okay.
Played drums to those religiously for like 2 years. Like literally just played along to every song on both of those albums for like 2 years. And then fast forward some more, find out about T-Pain. Like what was that, 2005? Rapper singer.
Yeah.
Freaking fell in love with that. I remember listening to the song Studio Love. I think that was like track 4 or track 5 on that album.
People hate on T-Pain all the time, too.
Because they're mad that he's the reason why they even have careers.
That's what I'm saying. He started the whole like
the auto-tune thing. Thank T-Pain. Yeah. Thank T-Pain.
It was original when he started it. Everyone else was like freaking bandwagon.
It was an industry secret, and nobody wanted people to know that most of the singers that they had couldn't actually sing. So I'm listening to freaking rapper turned singer, Studio Love. I remember laying in bed at night listening to that song, and there's like this time roll during like the turnarounds in between like the verses and the choruses on that song. It's like this and it's like it almost sounds like roto toms because they're like high pitched.
Oh, yeah.
And like I remember like hearing that sound travel from like the left headphone to the right headphone. I just thought that was the coolest thing in the freaking world. Fast forward some more, I find out about Lupe Fiasco. Freaking fan for life at this point. That's another component of the hip hop. Fast forward, find out about Kid Cudi.
Dude, Kid Cudi, I hate that. I don't. Does he still even make music?
Yeah.
I know he kind of took a break for a while, man. But Kid Cudi was so cool. Like I enjoyed his stuff so much.
So Man on the Moon 1 is what made me realize I need to do.
Yeah.
Like I was
It's
already
a
like
damn good
I
album.
was already enjoying music and like I had been writing songs and stuff. Like Lupe Fiasco's The Cool. I literally rewrote like probably just about every song. Like I knew the words to every song on that album, and then I like wrote my own versions of like almost all the songs on that album.
Yeah.
Like just with the beat in my head. And so like that's basically like how I like learned to format writing raps, I guess, in a sense. But like when I heard Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon, End of Day, it was like something unlocked where it was like I knew for a fact like I have to make. Like this is like a necessity.
Yeah.
Like one way or another, I'm doing this for life. Right? Man on the Moon 2, Legend of Mr. Razor literally got me through my one semester of college, which was like a horrible season of life. Freaking thankfully, the one good thing that came out of that semester was like at the beginning of it, the girl that played guitar for our youth group's worship team, she came and visited me and one of our friends because me and another guy that I went to high school with, we both ended up going to CIU. Didn't mean to drop a name because I'm definitely talking trash about the school.
Dude, my brother went
horrible.
there too, and he graduated and then went to, I know a lot of it's I graduated at Cardinal Newman.
Okay.
I had a wrestling scholarship to go wrestle, and
nice.
it's growing up Southern Baptist, ended up at a Catholic school.
Man.
So
interesting.
But CIU is definitely I know where you're getting, with some of it.
I'm gonna leave it there.
Yeah.
But I'll say the good thing that happened there was she came and visited me and the homie, and we were my friend Simeon. We were hanging out in his dorm, and she came and hung out with us for a little bit. Brought John Mayer's "Where the Light Is" tour DVD.
Okay.
Literally, this man opened for himself with an acoustic set for like 20 minutes or so, and the first thing he starts with is like just like he's just sort of jamming on like this riff, it's like whatever, and like does this crazy stuff with it. Then goes into the song Neon, and he's playing the lead electric part and the bass line at the same time on an acoustic guitar. I lost my freaking mind.
Dude.
Basically consider me a John Mayer fan for life after that. Like Dude,
he's awesome, man.
And so like that's like the foundation for me musically.
Okay.
Because it was like all those different things combined basically created what, like, I guess where I pull from creatively and sonically, as far as like the base of my music. And I guess from there, just like obviously different people came about. I found out about Kendrick. I found out about Tyler. Found out about Frank. Like just all these different people. Love Tyler the Creator. Love Frank Ocean. Love Kendrick Lamar. So
Dude,
many cool people.
one of my favorite people on affiliated with Kendrick that never really. I mean, I don't know. I'm not hanging out in all these like hip hop groups and stuff, but like I could tell that he didn't get the understanding and the hype he deserved was Absol. Dude, I've always been a big fan of his stuff. I mean, terrorist threats and Illuminati and all the stuff
when
he
I
did.
Heard terrorist threats.
You're sitting there like, what the hell, man? Holy shit!
Yo, that was honest. And what's crazy, like Absol gave you like the crazy bars in that song, and then Danny Brown,
dude,
just hit you with like real life. Yeah. I was like, it's real.
Well, it's like my favorite hip hop artist. It's I tried so hard to enjoy hip hop when I was in my young teenage years, but I grew up listening to the Beastie Boys. That was one of the things, and that was like
Beastie Boys tight.
And it was like so tough. I was like, man, I need to find a way to relate to someone. So I heard Hobson. And
Hobson was
probably been freaking, I don't know, 18 years I've been listening to that guy, man. Yeah. And he's gone up and down, but I've always enjoyed his comedy and his what he does. It's really messed up, some of it, what he says, but he's got that sense of humor. He's like me, that sense of humor where he doesn't hate everybody, but he's like going to talk some raw stuff. You know what I mean? And it's like Dizzy Wright, all these guys that came in.
I almost forgot about Dizzy.
Dude, he's awesome.
Dizzy Wright and Dizzy Rascal, which are two totally different people. But like, I remember hearing a little bit of those guys too around the same time that I found out about Hobson. And I thought I respected Hobson because we all knew what he was doing. Like, it's definitely like there's a tactic there.
Yeah.
like attack and then sit back and watch, you know?
But you look at guys like him, you know, and this is the beautiful thing is what he did with his fame now,
mhm.
you know, whatever. But like he was independent all the way.
You
You know what
know?
I mean? He built this with
They
the
built a
grind. So
super cool thing,
yeah,
and, like, I remember I saw a post not too long ago, sorta talking about it, and I thought about it, and I was like, "It is really kinda sad how that just sorta, like, fell off," because I guess whoever made some shiesty decisions or whatever,
yeah. Listen
the
to
case might
Illmind to
be,
Hobson 8. It'll
but
explain it.
freaking I remember listening to Illmind 7, and I think that sort of came off the heels of, like, him sorta struggling with the idea of God and after having some conversations with Lecrae and stuff, and I was like, I respect Hobson because while he might have like that sort of shock value tactic here and there, which is more so for fun and obviously attention, he still is gonna keep it real with you, like at some point within whatever the song is.
I felt like
You know,
Illmind 7 was like one of those when you're really in a rough patch in life.
he was crying out.
He was like praying to God,
Like that
like, you
song was
know,
literally a prayer.
yeah,
That's
it's a
that's
deep
and
one,
so
man.
like I definitely respected uh the way he went about that because it's like I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize about God is that he can take whatever it is that you have to give.
Yeah,
Whatever it is you have to dish out at him, he can I mean like Job,
yeah,
he started hurling his accusations and
yeah,
like airing out his frustrations and God was like, "I hear you. But hey, you see that? That's the moon. Did you do that?"
yeah,
You know? That sort of thing. And it's like not necessarily to be like, he's gonna put you in check when you're trying to like, tell him your feelings. But like I think
I feel like he does kind of redirect us at times with
well,
humility and things. Yeah,
sometimes you need that redirect,
yeah,
but it's not to say that you can't come to him with how you feel as honestly as possible.
yeah.
Like I remember
When that's the intimate,
that's part
like
of the
beautiful
intimacy.
part about it. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure at some point you probably heard the very super famous Christian song, "How He Loves."
Yeah.
Most people
What,
who
David Crowder? Yeah.
most people know the David Crowder version. The original song was written by John Mark McMillan, one of my favorite and one of the few Christian songwriters that I actually still enjoy listening to. But he actually talked about why he wrote the song. A friend of his died in a car accident. They were both on the way down to a studio session in Florida. His friends went up first. He was coming down after. His friends ended up dying in a car accident. Tragic. And it was like best friend of like God knows how many years.
Yeah.
He was pissed. He was like angry with God for a long time. And then at a certain point within his anger and resentment toward God, he realized like, oh, God can handle this. He can
Yeah.
handle me cussing him out and talking about how angry I am. Like he can handle like that's a strong kind of freaking love. When you can
Yeah.
handle someone being angry with you about more or less something that like sure God had control over it because he allowed it to happen. And that's a whole other conversation. But like when you can handle when someone can be angry at you and you not respond with anger back and you can hold them in that and be there with them in that, like that's a beautiful and strong kind of love.
Oh, it is.
Like and the average human doesn't really necessarily have like barely has the capacity for that on just a human level. So imagine on like an atomic and spiritual and just like colossal level, like between us and God,
Yeah.
and God having to endure that from everybody on the planet,
Yeah. It's
So
I've always believed God will, people say he'll never give you more than you can handle. And I've always
that's
believed
not true.
he'll give you just more than you can handle to test your faith. You know what I mean?
That's where I'm at with it. I'm like, because here's the thing, I really can't handle the way my bills be stacking up sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, unfortunately, the way my life, like, I make some pretty decent money on paper. Unfortunately, all the raises that I've got over the last few years have literally done nothing but just feel like, oh, cost of living increased. Here's a few extra. So that way,
Yeah.
it's still the same, basically, So, like, it'd be kind of tight sometimes, bro. I'm
Oh,
not
no,
gonna lie to
I
you.
totally get that, man.
With that said, every single time things get tight, somehow we make it through.
Well,
And
and
it's
the
not just
beauty of
because I'm making money.
the beauty of all this studio, everything is, everyone can do whatever they want with their money. But me, instead of going out drinking and partying and buying, weed or whatever it is, I'm not judging anyone who does, but I invest in what you know what I mean? Like
Wisdom.
and that's just like something I learned. I'm like, man, that $20 is gone. Like, what could have, what the hell? Like, now I can't play drums because I don't have sticks. Like, what the crap, Like, it's, and I've never been great with money, but if I want something bad enough, I figure out a way to, and that's definitely proof of God's existence. He gives me that strength and perseverance to just trust in Him, not like curse the world whenever something bad happens, but understanding, lean not on my own understanding,
Exactly.
but like, it's, yeah.
I know the axiom might be considered more worldly or woo-woo in some people's eyes, just because you hear it so much associated with whatever it is you want to associate it with. But I think the idea of choosing to believe that everything works out in your favor is actually very biblical. Because, it does say that God works all things out for the good of those who love.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the day, if it really is a perspective thing and a choice, which He really gives us. Like, you decide how you want to look at this. And sure, we're like, the only thing promised in this world is trouble.
Yeah.
So if the only thing promised is trouble, you can either look at it as, oh man, only thing promised is trouble, so every day is going to be absolute trouble. Or you can be like, okay, every day there's going to be some sort of test, but it's all basically to build me and culminate me into what it is I'm supposed to be and get me to where I'm supposed to go, which ultimately, hopefully, leads us back to God anyway, which works out for our good in the end. So it's just, it's a perspective thing.
Yeah, and I think it's everyone has to, whenever I started loving, whenever the challenge came, doesn't mean right whenever something happens, I don't get super upset or whatever it may be. But I think there's a warrior in everyone, and most people will never get to see that warrior because they don't know the discipline and consistency it takes to make that a warrior and not a rogue freaking fighter. To make a well-tuned warrior, but have the balance of being like a poet. You know what I mean? Having that, you have to be ready to protect and like stand up and defend and like truly like have strength, but also have love and empathy for those who need it, like children and wives and just people in general. Having that open heart, but also it's tough because I don't go out preaching to the world. I'm a horrible example most days. I try so good to be better, but like
I feel that
it's I just try to do the best I can every day, make some people laugh and stuff, and it's we'll see what happens from there.
it's about, I think it's really about the effort that you put in. Like if you're willing to put in effort and be like, all right, I gave it a valiant effort today.
Yeah.
Like if you can't honestly say that, then like, all right, try again tomorrow. But even if you can say that and you still fell short, which you will because you're human, at the end of the day, did I try? Yes, no, let's try again tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Now we'll dude, this has been an awesome one getting to know you, and this has been
absolutely,
it's been an awesome time. We'll have to do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely,
what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull up on the screen while you kind of tell everyone once more kind of where to find your stuff. I'm gonna share it up here so they can all see it.
JB Samson, JBSAMSON on basically everything. Spotify, Instagram, Snapchat, SoundCloud, iTunes, Apple Music, every other streaming service basically. Just look up JB SAMSON. If you want to hear some good music, feel free to check it out. And if you want some production done, if you're an artist, let me know. I like to build with people rather than just like, here's a beat pack. Like I'd much prefer to actually be like, yo, what kind of ideas do you have? What kind of sonics do you like working with? What do you hear in your head? Like, how can we bring that to life? I feel like that's a more honest way to go about. I'm not going to say more honest. It's just, I think, a more fulfilling way to go about things.
No, that's cool, man. There's not a lot of people like that. Like, you want trap, East Coast, West Coast? What you thinking, man? Hurry up, let me know. Well, you want like how many choruses? Do you want a bridge? Do you You know, do you know what an overture
Yeah.
is? Like, nah, man. Like, before we get into all that, like, let me
Like-
tell you, like, where my brain's at.
I think one of the coolest like co-production things I've ever done with someone is Coast's brother, Half Pint.
Oh yeah, man, little Matthew,
yeah,
man.
I
I
love
remember back
Matthew.
when he was playing violin and when he was like 8 years old.
That
Yeah,
man
he's
is
awesome.
stupid talented.
He is,
He's
man.
just,
He's
like
a genius.
ridiculously like, oh my, like he showed up at my house because we had talked about like linking up for like a year or so. We finally made it happen. I think like midway through last year, and he came to my house, showed up with his bass, his guitar, and this huge amp. And so, I think we spent like an hour and a half just talking about music, like an hour and a half just talking, probably 2.
Dude, he's
right?
he's
we were
awesome,
just like,
man.
and he put me on like so much good stuff. We finally started actually working on music. Like, what you want to do? I don't know. He had actually sent me a beat idea like some months back, and he was trying to like find like the original of that. Couldn't find it. He was like, let's just make something up. All right, cool. Plays this sick guitar riff. I'm like, oh, that's nice. Pulls out the bass. Plays this sick bass line. I'm like, oh, that's nice. And then he does another guitar riff. And then I do a guitar riff. And then he like starts messing around with this keyboard that I have over to the side. And like freaking starts playing something on the keys. And then like I do something on the MIDI keyboard over here. And then I throw some drums in. And it was just like this cool sort of like tandem thing where we're like just bouncing ideas off of each other like in real time. Not like it was just it was a great experience. And the result was like one of the coolest songs that I've ever been a part of. So
I will say when it comes to guitarist, man, you know, the reason I started playing drums at age 5 or wanting to play and then getting a set later was Animal from the Muppets. When I saw him eating his cymbals on stage, I was like, I want that.
Yep.
But like seeing Eddie Van Halen, you know, growing up, man, like my parents loved rock and roll. Seeing him just shred guitar and pop like a freaking cigarette in his, you know, in his frets and just sit up there, take his shirt off because he's sweaty as shit, and he'd be playing, and the crowd would just be like worshiping this guy. He'd just be like running up and down that thing. Like he built his own freaking guitars, man. David Lee Roth literally threw his keyboard in the dumpster and because he wanted to play keys for Van Halen.
Yeah.
They never would have been who they were if he wasn't like, he threw that shit in the dumpster and he's like, here, play guitar because you're better.
Wow.
And he, watching him play guitar made me want to learn drums that much more. Because his brother Alex is one of the best drummers too in the band. Everyone sleeps on him, but like just watching the guitar made me want to do that, but like on drums.
On the drums. It's so crazy how that works. It's like, how do I get that proficient over here?
Yeah.
You know? Like, it's a beautiful thing.
It is, man. But yeah, once again, everybody, it's been a great time. Thank you all for staying tuned. And you know, this has been a great episode here with JB Samson. Remember, find him on all his socials, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. I'll make sure to tag it all on here. But yeah, until next time, y'all, it has been a wild ride, and we'll have to catch up again soon, man.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
I'll show you real quick. I'm going to turn this